welcome to our webinar series on license to cure for device development. Today's topic is on requirements traceability. The definition on requirements and the validation to make sure that they have been implemented and validated in a proper way. Requirements management is part of any implementation in device development, so this is no exception. Additionally, it's a common tool set for any PLM implementation. And the motive and the driver for this is, of course, to introduce the requirements in the same environment as the product definition, have the validation on the product definition, and with that make sure that the intended scope has been achieved. So the basis for the session today is the out-of-the-box license to cure module, which is referred to as license to cure for requirements traceability. We've come quite some way with regards to functionality and introducing the license to cure. As you might see on our website, we have a number of webinars available now as movies. So if you have missed any of the previous sessions, just go to our website, the event page, and you'll find all previous sessions there. But today's topics, requirements management, how does it connect to the overall strategy of license to cure? So as pointed out previously with the software suite for device development, we want to have one version of the truth on the product definition, its current status, what is the version of the truth, the common version of the truth shared across the extended enterprise and across our global development organization. Additionally, item number 2 there is the compliance status, and that's really one of the essential parts, how requirements management is implemented to display current status on validation. It also connects to the project status, since our product requirement spec is of course an essential deliverable as part of design controls, and its continuous validation is an important deliverable in the validation and design transfer activities. So that sets the frame. It's requirement management, and it really is at the core of the PLM solution. So one of the essential questions is, why do we do this as part of PLM? Why not do it as standalone? Why not do it? There are plenty of suites, software suites, best of breed solutions. But the core essence here is to make the requirements and their validation inherent part of the version of the truth of the product definition, and have the traceability on these validations back to requirements as part of the definition, but also to understand if there is anything change in the product definition, how does that relate to this traceability? How does it impact the validation? Do I need to rerun the test? How does it impact any risk assessment, any hazard identification? How does it impact our usability? So it really is the connected product definition, which is the essence here. It's also one reason is because in the PLM platform, that's where we keep our regulatory classification. That's where the classification is managed. And that's also where the product architecture is built. That's where we define our modules. That's where we at least partially define our configurations. So it really defines the framework for verification, and that's why we need our requirements connected to that. So it really is at the heart of the closed loop validation, traceability between requirements and validation. And in between there are different product definition, either a conceptual model in one end or a more detailed prototype or released product, whatever it might be at any stage in the product lifecycle. So it's really in the closed loop from requirement to validated change, and the essence is to reduce the lead time for that change loop based on the correct scope. And it's from any detailed requirement, it's a question of having a clear transparency and clear connection from the requirement to the hazard, to the risk, to the detailing of the risk and the risk mitigation, and understand how they might be validated, how they should be validated, both on a conceptual model, but also on a prototype, and later on as represented in License Secure through a model or through the instantiated product. So it really addresses the transparency and traceability all through all different stages of or life cycle stages of the requirements, as well as anything connected to the product model. It's also essential, since we are managing test and validation scope here. A part of that might be the type tests required for certification. And as such, it's the closed loop validation, which is a prerequisite for our compliance, positive compliance status, and our assessment of the compliance risk. So it's really essential for that part. Related to the validation, or perhaps related to the validation and confirmation of our claims. These are the 5 very good reasons why requirements traceability and requirements management should be a part of PLM. Okay, so looking at our standard device development process, requirements traceability, requirements management is valid all through all different stages. It starts early in conceptual design. A more detailed description is this, where we set and select conceptual features of our product. It might be the definition of our product requirements from a product manager point of view or a marketing point of view, and with that also the definition of our regulatory claims. And we want to set those early, and we want to refine them further on. But that might be the initial introduction of requirement management. Then we come to the product concept feasibility spec as part of and continued over to design and development. Through the conceptual feasibility and the specification phase, of course, we want to detail the product description, and we want to detail the engineering system, the product specifications, and how these are modeled. So that's where we connect our requirements initially and detail our requirements in the R&D phase. That is followed by the detailed product requirements as part of the design and development. And that might be, say, going from some rough requirements, perhaps 50 to 100, down to 1500 detailed requirements all through the development phase. And of course, we want the verification and validation test plans to connect to that, and all deliverables and test records connected to that. And of course, that work is further detailed through design verification and validation. And that goes through all the verification, validation, and test execution and support for that, where we actually handle the detailed tests and the test planning, as well as test execution, and can potentially drive that from Innovia. We also want to make sure that all standards are met, and we map the regulatory areas, say EMC requirements, to the standards and break those down into detailed requirements. And that's how we keep track on the requirements all through the type tests. In that part, we come back to the usability validation. We come back to the risk definition and the risk mitigations. And we want to make sure that those are met with relevant validation. If we, in a late stage, perform fixes and corrections, we want to make sure that we can support this with proper regression testing, and with that we want proper support. For design review, we use these tools continuously through the reviews, and that's one basis for our decision making as our qualification is completed. After post-launch, we also want to reconnect, either that we have complaints registered on the products, or we just want to plan and execute the design update. And then, of course, we want to reconnect to the initial design controls, the initial design intent, and the previous test protocols, and the previous test schemes, and the previous validation. So that's where it comes back in a post-launch phase. So we apply requirements management in all these different areas in very varying ways. The demonstrations I'll do today will be based on the out-of-the-box functionality as part of License to Cure. I should state that especially in requirements management, the implementations we do are often configured with Technia value components in order to speed up the modeling and approval cycles, and perform quicker configuration or configurations for perhaps quicker approvals of requirements and test schemes. But these are fairly unique for all different implementations. So I'll show you the out-of-the-box License to Cure in the as demonstrated here today, but it should be pointed out that the different implementations might vary more or less from this scope. So what kind of process is then supported with this functionality? So we're typically starting with requirements capture, where we, in an Excel spreadsheet or in a Word document, have defined the requirements in written text, and we want to be able to read that text, these documents, and define within those texts what are the requirements, and we want to reuse that information. Because if we have been running advanced requirement management for some time, of course, then we typically work towards a library of requirements and test sets and validation procedures. But quite common is that we start from a document. This might be the first introduction of more advanced requirement management, and therefore we might start in a Word document, or that's what we get as input from our product managers or our marketing organization. So requirement capture is not a mandatory task, but definitely a way we want to approach efficient introduction of requirements from our internal organization or from bodies outside our own organization. When imported and when defined, I need a review process and an assignment. Who should be allowed to edit this? Perhaps several different people. And as you can see here, within requirements definition and execution, we have quite a wide set of different roles, and these could be a wider set in reality. We have a marketing leader, that could be a product manager, product line manager, an assortment planner, a role where they have the mandate to define new requirements or claims. We have a system architect, which is setting up the conceptual design or the conceptual architect, or a more mature design. We have a program manager, which are allocating the required resources for the definition, pointing out roles, have a responsibility of updating the design history file, and connect it to the development project, saying that these are the deliverables we need at a certain point in time. We have a systems engineer who might do the specific detail design of a subsystem. So he or she, there will be several different tasks delegated to mechanical engineers or electrical engineers or software developers, which are part of a bigger system. And then there are the validation specialist who is responsible for setting up and planning the test scheme and executing the tests. And they should have support for anything from this, just setting up the general test plan to the detailed execution of tests, saying that yes, this test has been executed and properly completed. So we have a many different functions involved in this process. And as you can see, we have several different tasks going back and forth between different interests. So it becomes very important to be able to have a view on what's going on, what are the tasks, where are we in the process, and be able to delegate the work, resend the work, and send it back to someone who's previously been involved with a specific task. So if we started off in requirement capture, then we went into review and assignment, we'll come to the product where we want to say at any particular point in our design controls, we have the requirement spec or specific updates as part of our design history file. And we want to make that visible in our audit trail. After this, we'll go into the definition of different system features and the detailing of requirements on that level. Connected to that is the test, setting up the test, and then sending out the test for internal approval, making sure that yes, this is the test we should execute, and these are the resources related to this. We'll have a final review of that specific feature, and we have a test execution, and with that, a test report. At some point in time, we want to understand, okay, this actual test, what kind of impact will it have on our other parts of our design? And if some test is changed, or if some requirement is changed, how do we make sure that that the tests are updated? Because if there is a substantial change in the basic requirement, for example, we want everyone in this perhaps somewhat complex flow to be informed that, okay, there is a change upstream or downstream. And if you're aware of that change, you're not wasting resources completing tests which have already been decided that they will be obsolete. So we need a mechanism to be able to communicate the changes going on into this workflow back and forth. In the end, we want a final approval on the validation and of course a possibility to perform more advanced analysis on dependencies between different requirements, between different projects, between different products, between different variants and products. So that's the complete chain we have. So if we go from here, I'll jump into a movie on the application. And this is what it looks where we were. And let's start up this movie. I used a movie in this case because it's fast forwarding, so it's faster than working through a manual demo. And that's the guarantee that we can keep our timeline. So this is what a requirement spec might look like. And I'm here in Word. I have a specific module inside Word where I have these capabilities, where I can define requirements, I can add comments, I can define different chapters. I have the tools to import this information into Innovia, and I can have different ways of switching on toggle views on with different colors, with different bookmarks, in order to make my definition of an import of requirements from this Word document, in this case, into Innovia. This could be an Excel spreadsheet as well. The basic logic is the same. So I need to set up a new specification, and I've defined my different requirements like this. And as soon as defined in green, they are marked for import. So I can go in quite short time period. I can go through quite large documents. I save this document as a specification, a product requirement spec, into Innovia, and on my left-hand side here I can see, okay, what should be imported. And in this case, I select all specific childs to these requirements, and I defined how they should be imported with what kind of policy, what kind of chapter. And I might have different policies and rules for regulatory requirements, for detailed feature requirements, for claims, for any specific subset of requirements. And of course, I could build up my library of requirements inside Innovia. And whenever I introduce a new regulation, I rather read my requirements from that template. But in this case, we assume everything is available in our Word document here, and we select Create. So just clicking through those checks for my check-in, and this is what it looks like when I have imported the requirements into Innovia. In this case, I'm logged into Innovia as Sandra, which is a systems architect, and she has the role of understanding these requirements, making sure that they are properly classified, they're properly set up. So she might do an initial basic review on the details here. So still expand all to see the visibility on the different parts of the requirements, and she might switch into export view to edit any information here. And we have basic capabilities to set fonts, classify the different requirements. We can see their status, if they're in create state or if they've been approved. And we can go into each and every requirement and do additional definitions. So in this case, I want to assign this requirement to some different users who might be interested in using the requirements. And I need someone who is to define this and someone else who is to define the validation scope. So I set up the access level here. I save my settings, and from there I want to take it forward, promote it, and have it as a requirement which I can detail further and connect it with a specific product. So in this case, I want to connect it to the power part. That's one of the automated external defibrillators which we're working with, and we can see here I'm working on the product line and on the models because that's what I use for my validation. So in this case, these requirements have become candidate requirements, so they're up as potential candidates which will be used later on for validation. I just say that yes, we search for these requirements, and this assumes that we're familiar with the requirements, so we have an idea of their naming convention. But I could search on any property of that requirement, and we connect to the project. And in this case, I want to set in the planning phase. I want to connect the requirement as part of the design history file. So in this case, I select that specification, and in this case, I'm on that specification, and I connect it to the DHF. And I can see what's my status of the different requirements. In this case, I might want to evaluate these. I check the details for this functional requirement. I define it as a derived requirement from some top-level requirement. So I define the internal structure between my different requirements. In this case, I also want to connect the decision to this requirement to clearly state that yes, we make an active decision on the to accept this requirement and to accept the validation. And I want this traceability on the decision, of course, as part of my audit trail. And that's how I set that up. Okay. In this case, I want to connect a test case. So I create a new one. And I'll just select auto name to set appropriate auto numbering series for my test case. I give it a description. So in this case, it is the measurement of the active surface of my pad and what formula to use. And I might add dates and completion dates if that's relevant. So now I have a new candidate test case. And I want to route this within my organization to have a formal approval on this validation, on this test case. So I search for my validation specialist, which I know will be involved in the validation, and then I request an approval from him and submit that. I could also have added response times when I need a reply in order to keep my development schedule. So I go back to my decision. I can now see that I have a requirement connected to that, and I can see its details. I'm now logged on as the validation specialist, and down here I can see what's the category of the requirement, and is it approved or is it a candidate still? Okay, I check the details once more since I haven't been into that test case yet as validation specialist. I check what should I approve on this test case. I check the connected decision based on that, and I accept the validation scope as a formal decision on this. and I then will have it available in my audit trail. In this case, I also want to send out a and show my decision. I check my task. See the contents, the test case. And I see that I want to take that one to approve. So I select the dialog for the approval. I have a mandatory comment there. So I'll just write in that yes. In this case, I'm not in line with the systems engineer on how it should be validated. So I will actually reject this and send it back to the systems engineer in this case. So it goes back to that previous stage, and let's log on as Martin, the systems engineer. So he will see that he got a rejection on the request for the validation. Goes into the task, navigates on the task, and will find the test case. If I would work with Outlook, I would get that mail in Outlook, and I would automatically log in to Novia from Outlook through that link, the same link. So I update my test case, and will then resubmit it to the validation engineer. Here I'm using the standard route capabilities, which some of you might be familiar with in Enovia. So I'm just rerouting this and send it back. So it goes back to the validation specialist, the Alex in this case, and he will then look at the updated task and hopefully approve this one. So reviewing the details once more, and now we can see that yes, it's in line with my expectations, and the formula which we've defined, yes, that seems to be correct, or that is correct, so that will be used for the validation. I approved it, and it's a Part 11 compliant approval, so it's dual signature. In this case, I type my password and I accept it, and it's now confirmed, and I can see that in my audit trail on the test case. So this is my formal approval. Okay, let's have a look at some of the traceability capabilities here. So in this case, we assume that the test case has been approved. Let's see how that's visible in the system. There are a number of different modules related to requirements management. This is the one where I view my requirement specs. And here I want to run a traceability report between requirements and my different tests. And this is one of the possibilities I have for traceability assessment, where I see these are the requirements defined, these are the test case on my right-hand side, these are the nodes for validation, and I can see what's the status of validation. In a similar fashion, it's quite often that we do similar status reports and maturity reports for changes, not only on the validation status in themselves, but just to track, has anything related or any prerequisite for a type test, for example, have that changed? And if so, what's that change? And the tracking mechanism then is to see and identify that yes, something was changed, and then just to reconfirm that okay, there is a change, we are aware of that, but it doesn't mean that we need to revalidate. And that's a logic which is more advanced. It's summarized under a module which we call global market access. It's something which actually will be covered in a webinar further or later on this spring, but that's a good example on the traceability studies. But here we're out of the box and we look at a fairly simple traceability between the requirement and the test case. So let's proceed. So we review the different states here. We can say that yes, the validation passed as we approved it. No real surprises in that scope. And that's also why we have on a higher level, we had a yellow status on the requirement spec that it is in progress. There's nothing hindering us with regards to those requirements for a release of the product. Here we're also reviewing the different statuses of requirements, and we have several different tools. When we're setting up new systems, we often do more advanced studies on requirements dependencies, and that's, for example, for us to build up a conceptual model of systems engineering of a more advanced design for requirements. And for these kind of traceability studies, we have a separate tool called Rectify, which we use for requirement analysis across multiple systems. This tool is typically used before we set up a requirement structure inside Innovia. That's where we do our prototyping for the requirement assessment. And here it's easy to do quick analysis upstream, downstream between different requirements to understand what are the different what are the dependencies, how do they work, both from requirements to tests to risk mitigations to risks, to different prototypes, to different subsystems of designs. And here we need more advanced capabilities for analyzing different requirements and their dependencies. So these are typically used in combination with Innovia. This is also software which is owned and developed by Dassault Systems, and we've used it with good success together with the requirements management functionality within Innovia. Okay. We might come to an end to the validation cycle, closed loop cycle within Innovia. In this case, we'll change the requirements, do the modification, and here's important that we can trace this change and understand. Assume that we change the active surface in this case. What kind of implication does that have, and how does it impact our different tests? So here I go directly to the test to state that yes, the validation needs to be rerun because we've changed the active surface. It's such an important quality parameter, so we need to rerun the validation and big part of analysis on the requirement detailing as well. So I need to rerun the approval. I sent that in a similar fashion as before for validation. So as you can see, I was the Martin, the system engineer. I've sent it over to Alex, the validation specialist. So as validation specialist, I check my inbox in Outlook or inside Innovia. I select on my task, and here I'll access my task. And I get an immediate view into Innovia on the relevant test case. Select on the test case, I edit the details, and I rerun the validation and a conclusion that the validation is passed. Go in and perform a formal approval. So let's add a comment. It's mandatory. So just have a comment that this is what was updated and this is the new validation. I approve it. I add my signature and my blessing to this validation, and I add my trace in the audit trail. And I promote it to validate state. So that's how it might look like. We've gone through the complete chain of events from the initial capture of requirements from a Word document through its initial refinement and detailing to the approval, and then connect it to a test case, and I validated the test case, sending it back and forth. This is the basic functionality. So this functionality is applied in many different ways, but then it's adopted for different purposes. It's often configured for different implementations. In all examples, the whole essence of adding this functionality to PLM is to keep this information where we have our product definition. So we really have one version of the truth. We know what was the intention, and what were the requirements to be met, and what are the requirements detailed. And we want to connect this to the collected IP we have in design controls. We also want to make sure that it's connected to our validation loop on the prototype and on the released product. And we want to have the transparency from any risk or risk mitigation or any prototype back to its initial requirements, to know that we're testing this against the current version of the truth with regards to the requirements. And we also will need that to determine our compliance risk and compliance status, and that's part of that validation loop. So that's an introduction to requirement management, what it might look like in a device development excellence context. In its most simple form, the whole requirements validation loop can be made much more complex than it usually is. We want to connect it to our modular design. We want to have perhaps a more efficient view on how we approve requirements, test scopes, or whatever definition we have. There are some extensions to be done, for example, based on our technical value components. So we're with that coming to an end of today's webinar. Before ending though, I want to highlight two things. One is our event, which is held in Copenhagen in April. It's on April 15 and 16. It's actually a 1.5 days event. First half a day is open for anyone, and that's held in Ørestad at Medicon Valley Alliance in Copenhagen, in their new offices, where we'll introduce interested organizations, perhaps people at existing users, or in device development organizations completely new to PLM or new to Innovia, to the functionalities typically covered in these kind of webinars, where we'll have a detailed introduction to selected areas. That's in the first half a day on April 15. In the evening, there will be a dinner downtown Copenhagen, and that will be for the new users who attended the session earlier in the day, or to mature users of Innovia and PLM. So it's a networking dinner where you can meet and share experience, ask questions, discuss applications, and that will be covered in the evening. The second day, in the before lunch, it will be an open session for everyone, which covers some key current challenges and trends. So we have the UDI topic, for example, where we've come a little bit further than previous sessions. And we want to go into depth about UDI and DI and how the device identifier is defined all through the product development phase, and how that maps to the change process, how it maps to the approval of different parts and different modules within a design. But we'll also cover other topics such as search capabilities, such as design history records, and how the manufacturing execution can be supported from Innovia. For you to know more on the agenda for the second day and the first day, please go to the event page on our website, and there you'll find details on the event. And if you follow the link further down on that page, you'll get all the details, what is happening, when, and which sessions are open for you as a customer or someone who's new to Innovia. And there you got the link for the registration, of course. Remember the date, April 15 and 16, and you're very welcome to our session at in Copenhagen. It's jointly arranged with one of our key Innovia organizations in Copenhagen, which is Oticon, or William Demant Holding. So we will use their facilities for the second day. Afternoon, the second day, is for existing Innovia users only. It's the reoccurring Life Sciences Customer Advisory Board, where we discuss with our customers their current challenges, their expectations on the solution, their expectations on Technia, and we discuss what's coming in the future, how can we better support our customers. But we'll also go into depth about the recently released 15X release and demonstrate this. So really looking forward to these sessions in 2 days in Copenhagen in mid-April. Registration is open, so go into the event page, find this event, and you're more than welcome to register. If you would like to know or have any questions regarding the registration or the event, just send us an email or notice, and we'll contact you and answer you. Okay. As usual, this recording or this webinar is recorded, so you will be, at the end of the day, you'll find a recording of this session on requirements traceability on our website. So if you want to share it with colleagues, debate it, discuss it, and come back to it with more detailed discussions, you're more than welcome to view the webinar. Let's see if there is time for questions. So let's see if there is something which has come up. So no questions sent to the system. So with that, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me on the usual email. Thank you very much for attending today, and with this we'll close the session. Thank you. Bye-bye.